Okay, I'm excited to welcome Rod Brinson to Reinvention Room. Hey, Rod.
Hey, Allison, how you doing?
Good. It's so great to reconnect with you. And we are both ex DocuSign employees, now both entrepreneurs, both in the personal branding space. So it's been exciting that when you meet people in whatever circles of life, and you're like, there's something more. There's something more here. You were like that.
For sure, same here. I mean, as soon as we connected, I was like, I need to stay connected to her. So here we are.
And connected we did. So today we're going to do kind of a live coaching session around your podcast and your business. Tell me, we can go a lot of different ways. And I want to be really mindful of, tell us, Rod, tell us a little bit about you, your business, and why you signed up for a coaching session. What would be really helpful for you to get out of today?
I appreciate that. So, first and foremost, I am a brand strategist, and my focus is helping people to understand their unique value, what they bring to the world, and then presenting it in a way where they can basically monetize it and find fulfillment in life. So, obviously, I have a marketing background and things of that nature, but I decided to reach out to you for help with my podcast, primarily because I don't really have strategy. I don't have direction, and I want to make sure that what I'm bringing is valuable. I'm stuck kind of in between doing solo episodes, which I don't really care to do, versus having guest based episodes. And I also kind of am leaning away from that for fear of having to chase people down for scheduling and things of that nature. So, I end up in the middle doing much of nothing or just repurposing long form content that I do on other platforms for the purpose of
Mm.
having a podcast.
So you've got a podcast now, right?
Correct.
And it's called what?
It's called Beyond the Brand, is basically the stories behind the people who create these companies and the founders and things of that nature.
Is Because I looked up Beyond the Brand, but I couldn't find it. I found a lot of podcasts that were some kind of variation of that. Tell me more about that. Is it set up for, wide distribution, or was it set up locally on Spotify or one of the platforms, but not all of them?
Yeah, definitely set up for wide distribution. I went through Transistor, I believe, FM, and we
Yep.
went through Apple, Spotify, all of the norm. I even do video based, so it's on YouTube, etc. But the reason you probably couldn't find it is because, as I mentioned, I kind of stuck in between and just barely repurposing content here and there
Mm.
versus something consistent.
Okay. So I think, first of all, I love this. I think we're going to get some real clarity today. And we'll kind of work through it together. And so I will give you a disclaimer. I have really strong opinions, Rod.
That's fine.
Is I always want to make sure that no matter how strong my opinions are, make sure that it is aligned with you. So I always ask you to default to your own intuition. You will know. But I do get emphatic about things. And the reason why I share that is that I have been in coaching engagements where people's excitement has taken me right off the rails of what I knew to be true. And so I want to pay it forward and kind of say that up front that you will always have the best answers, but I'm going to help guide. And so in the podcast process, when it comes to strategy, I always talk about the 4 Ps, and we'll walk through them step by step. So the first P is purpose. The first P is like, what purpose does this podcast serve for you as the business owner, as the podcaster? The second P is the person. Who are you serving? The third P is premise. And that's what most people think about. What's your podcast about? Like, what is the unique angle that your podcast will serve? And the fourth thing is, what is the promise? Meaning, what is the packaged takeaway that a listener tunes in? They're going to always rely on getting something that they can take away. I think of it as like a packaged snack, like a bag of Doritos, right? You can go past your pantry, you can take out this bag, you can eat it, you can share it, right? But if it is all over the place, it's hard to figure out, like, what do people take away? How will they, you know, whether it is something that they will laugh every time, or is it a takeaway that they can apply? Is it a framework? Is it an equation? Is it some piece of information that they can apply right away? So that's kind of the basis of that. And I want to go back to the beginning of the purpose of why a podcast?
Uh,
What purpose will it serve for you?
yeah, great question. And you know, I'll admit selfishly, it had an initial draw to me because I recognized the power of having a podcast, the reach, the longevity of it, the posterity of it. You know, once you create an episode and it has any kind of value or meaning, you put it out for the world to hear, it's out there forever, right? And it can continue to grow. So it was initially, you know, self motivated where I'm like, I'm growing a business, I'm growing a brand, there's no better way to do that in today's world than to have a podcast in addition to social media, etc. Eventually, it evolved into not being able to find things myself, right? So, as a business owner, I listen to podcasts on a regular basis, and all the business, brand based, you know, entrepreneur based podcasts weren't really speaking to me in a language that fit where I was and the
Mm.
people that I was trying to serve. So, whenever that happens, I always think, well, if it doesn't exist, I might as well create it. So my goal was to create something that entrepreneurs and other people who are trying to build a brand or a business can begin to get nuggets from through my podcast.
I love it. The other aspect of this is that when it comes to the purpose of your podcast is usually it has typically 4 different purposes, primarily, meaning primary drivers. That doesn't mean that it's one or the other, it's not one or it is, but it really helps shape the show.
Uh-huh.
So, usually, the primary purpose can be usually one of 4 things. One is a credibility and trust builder. You know, like if somebody is gonna drop 10 grand to work with you, it's not because you had a really clever 7-second reel that they're like, "That's it," right? They need to know who you are. They need to know that what you share is going to be meaningful and useful for you, right? Like you know, you aren't going to people are more discerning today. And so a podcast really, really serves. And I feel like every single business asset that you have should feel like what it's like to work with you. And
Uh,
so it can be primarily a trust and credibility creator. The second one is that it is a lead generator. Now, a show that is predominantly, you know, like primarily a lead driver is going to be a different show than a trust and credibility primary.
right.
Um, the way that it's structured, right? Like if it is only just getting leads, it needs to be structured and incredibly focused.
Uh,
That doesn't mean that it can't do both at the same time. It's just what's the primary driver. The third driver, a primary driver is a way to a high value networking tool, meaning you could have your dream clients on as guests, right? Like just like I'm doing right now with you. This is the perfect example of
so
like,
I'm your dream client. Got it.
you're my dream client, Rod. And the fourth one is place to express yourself. You know, sometimes people will come and say, I want to have a podcast because I just want to share my story and inspire people. But without like a structure and a strategy, there's not a lot of like how you know, you'll get to 3 episodes maybe, but then it can kind of lose steam unless you've got like some kind of infrastructure underneath it. So having said that, where would you say is your primary driver?
Uh, it's stuck probably between the lead generation and um, I guess helping to create and nurture the thought leader space where people see me and they're able to pull that content to help them make a decision down the line. I would feel the most comfortable in those spaces.
Okay, great. So that helps shape the show. Then we can get a little more specific for it. So moving on to the second P is the person. Who is your ideal listener? So I'll give you a little bit of a framework. So when you think of your audience, usually your primary listener, your person, and the reason why I don't say people I say, who is the person that you're talking to? So if you're talking to one person, it's better than like, hey guys, hey everybody, like podcasts have the ability to be so intimate.
Uh,
People take you on a run with them. They take you with them after they've had a fight with their spouse. They take you with them to do laundry. They take you with them to go take a dump. Let's be honest,
sure.
like in the bathroom, like you're with them. And so
Yeah.
it is important to talk to a person and
Uh,
not to everybody. And so like the ideal, like the primary listener is your ideal client, somebody that can afford to pay you, right? Like somebody that's the decision maker. Secondary is usually people that may support that person or really interested in it, people that may share your show. And then you
uh,
might have the tertiary listener, that's somebody that is more of a passive listener. They all hold value, right?
uh,
Maybe they get, maybe they are kind of in the marketing world and they want to learn more about it, right? They're never going to buy from you. And maybe that isn't necessarily the point, right? Depending on the kind of show that you have. So, having said that, who would you say is your ideal listener, the person that you're talking to?
Great question. I would say it's between solopreneur, entrepreneur,
Okay.
primarily because ideally they are looking to learn more about who they are and how they present themselves to the world as the founder, as the CEO, as the person who's running the organization. And I think that understanding personal branding from the aspect that I bring it, the frameworks that I bring, and things of that nature make the most sense for that audience.
Great. What would you say is your secondary?
A secondary, I would say the corporate 9 to 5er who is interested in entering the entrepreneur space. They just don't know where
Okay.
to begin or how to get
Yeah,
started. Yeah.
that's great. And what would you say would be like the tertiary listener?
I think you hit it on the head. The other brand strategists and marketers out here who are in the world, in the space, they just are looking for a different opinion or, a version of it that they might not have thought of just to kind of add to their plate.
So it sounds like it can give access to maybe a new perspective, a new point of view that can help them in their journey. That makes a lot of sense. See, you're getting this. So when you think of like the premise of your show for the third P, what would you say? What's the show about?
Hmm.
What's your unique perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I'm an avid podcast listener, and you hear a certain structure, and I'm okay with structure, but from a context point of view, especially in this space, in this realm with entrepreneurship, I think too often the podcasts that are out is at least the popular ones they speak on a level that is more advanced, so to speak. Maybe companies who have 10 to 20 employees or companies who have already, ascertained six figures or, multiple six figures and into the sevens. And I think the mom and pops are forgotten about. I think the person just starting out has no place to understand, EBITDA and all of the other different acronyms that come along with running a business. So it's like my goal is to make it so that that starting point is visible and it's attainable and you can listen to a show where you can grab hold to some of those principles and then begin to apply them almost immediately.
Okay, so mom and pops are left out. So that's kind of even the person, right?
Yeah.
The solopreneur, the entrepreneur, the person that's trying to blaze their own trail, right? But they may not. I really like the concept of visibility of like the next step is visible and obtainable. I think where people struggle, Rod, is that, the world tells you you need to be on social media. You need to post every day. You need to be on all the platforms. You need to hook them in 3 seconds. You should start a podcast. You should start a YouTube channel. Why don't you build a course? Why don't you write a book? Why don't you speak on stage? And you're like, okay, well, you're up for it all. But we end up like getting so diluted with our focus. and we go so wide that we forget to go deep.
Mm,
And so I'm curious about your unique point of view of how do you make it so simple to kind of clear out the noise? Because there is a lot of noise and it keeps people really stuck.
man. First of all, that's an amazing question. I don't think I've been asked a question that great. So my philosophy is this, and I actually talked about this today briefly on social media. People are always focused on finding their who they're serving, who their avatar is, who their primary customer, the target customer, etc. But I think the who that they need to find is within. Who are you? What makes you tick? What makes you unique? And how can that bring you fulfillment? And once you tap into kind of carving out the model of you that you should line up with, I think that's when you begin to sprout and you can find a pinpoint to go deeper in. Because anytime you bring up those things that you just mentioned, start a podcast, post 3 times a day, whatever it is, it's going to be deer in headlight moments for majority of people who are just
Yeah.
starting out. And the reason is because they don't have a true identity. They don't really know their own brand. And so that's the starting point for me. And that's the unique value that I bring. I help people to understand who it is they are, what makes them unique, and how they can tap into that in a more confident way. So that when they get ready to post and start the podcast and things of that nature, they don't have to go and shapeshift into somebody else, which is where most people
Mm.
struggle. They can just be
Yeah.
themselves in front of the camera.
How do you help people get there?
Yeah.
And from an audio perspective, how would you communicate that? Because, audio, this is theater of the mind.
hmm Agreed. So, as you know, there are frameworks for everything. I've built out a few, but I concentrate on these 5 things: belief, roadmap, appearance, network, and drive. And when you break it down, it spells brand. But as you saw, it begins with belief. And I'm not talking about faith or religious beliefs. I'm simply talking about belief in self, the belief that you can do something. And the way you work on that is just finding out on an individual level where this person is today. Because some people are very confident in certain areas and not so confident in others. Pulling out their unique value and finding out what it is they have a strength in, I think is something that only a coach can do. Right? You think about a football team or a basketball team or any team per se that has a coach. The job of the coach is to recognize the players on the team for their strengths and their talents and their weaknesses, and then to organize them in a way where it can help them to win, not just collectively, but individually. Right. And so, as a brand strategist, that's part of the work I do. I sit and talk and discover who it is that I'm talking to, and I help to develop the pieces within them that they can't see themselves.
This is very ripe to have your ideal clients on as guests,
Mm,
because when people can see you do that
ah,
and see you, it sounds like you have formulas, right? Like some frameworks that you can help walk people through. But you saying only a coach can do that is sticking out to me, because you're right. It's hard to see the label when you're in the jar. And, like I can't tell you how many courses and masterminds and programs and coaches, group coaching programs I've signed up for, where I'm a good student. Like, I'll do all of this stuff, but if it doesn't work, I don't know what went wrong.
mm,
And sometimes it is, like I needed somebody to hear me and somebody to help me identify, like, what like, for somebody like me, and this is not a coaching session for me, but for somebody like me, I imagine there are a lot of people that are either leaving corporate America or, are, if they are an entrepreneur, generally speaking, they are going against the grain. There is something where they don't necessarily feel like they fit in a natural structure. And so having somebody to help them almost have permission to lean into what makes them unique and hear it is really valuable. Would you agree, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that not only are you completely accurate, but it crosses over into the corporate world before they even leave. So, quick backstory, before I left DocuSign, I was battling internally. I'm talking day in and day out. I'm going from, you know what, this is my job, let me focus, to like really stressful days where I have to take off work. And what I found in that time, and this is how I'm able to help people, is that what I was really doing was battling myself internally. I know that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, but I've been programmed with comfortability, and I've developed certain responsibilities in life that I have to take care of, that this job ultimately provides a paycheck for, right? Well, one day I found myself having to go to a corporate, let's just call it a executive meeting, and it was 12 of us going to this room, and I knew we had to talk about our career path. Hey, what do you want to do? How can I help you in your career path? And I was just wrestling, Allison. I'm like, I don't want to go in here and lie to these people.
Yeah, those were though I hated those. You're right. I never even thought of that, but those gave me the sweats
Yeah, I want to go
because
in
I
here
didn't
and
wanna say what I really wanted.
yeah, but then there's the fear of, oh man, they're not gonna like this. They're gonna let me go, right? But nobody is born saying, I want to go work a 9 to 5 for a company. Like that's just not how we grow up, right? So I decided I was gonna partially tell the truth. So I leaned into my marketing background, I leaned into my branding background. I told them what I really wanted to do for that company when it was really what I wanted to do for myself. And so I got an answer that was really great. He said, um, why wait until you get a position in the company to go ahead and start doing some of those things that you're naturally good at in your current role? And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, well, I could put together some presentations, some video editing. I could, pull out some of my talents, from a marketing branding standpoint in my current role. Immediately changed my atmosphere. My energy shifted. Like I went from being a guy who didn't want to report to work to reporting to work with like boldness and audacity because I was
Wow.
doing something that I was uniquely qualified to do. So when I finally decided to leave that space and tap into it full time, it was easy for me to see those things in other people and help them to kind of turn that wheel just ever so slightly.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
once they do, it's just like something just clicks and you're able to take it on. But last thing I'll say on that piece, what I've noticed is that so many people try to do it on their own. And watching YouTube channels and even taking master classes and things of that nature, those are all great. But you need somebody who can guide you and pull you back on course when you decide to veer off. And that's where I come in.
I wonder about I love that, and also, I think, because so many people are multi-passionate, like, you have this personal branding, background and this expertise, but you're also working in almost a completely different field in DocuSign, right? Like, different perspectives, so the multi-passionate, multifaceted, multi-skilled kind of thing can be almost very tormenting for somebody of where do I focus my energy, And I think the answering the question, where do I channel my energy? If these are my gifts and talents, how do I take that energy and put a structure, a strategy around it that can help me make an impact to grow my business, to grow whatever it is, my influence? I think there's a lot that you can do there. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. But to your point, focusing your energy matters.
Yeah.
Like working for another organization where I truly want to do something for myself is always a daunting task. But I perfected it over a course of time in a way where when I was working for DocuSign for, those 8 hours during that day, I did whatever I could to not focus on my business. And when I was working my business, I did whatever I could to not focus on DocuSign. And so I would work 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. for my business and I would shut off. I would literally turn the emails off, notifications, put it to the side and focus on DocuSign. And then lunchtime was mine. I'm going to watch a show. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do anything other than work. Right. So it's all about compartmentalizing and segmenting your life where you're giving the various things that you care about true focus. And what does that focus look like? I mean, water can cut through a rock. If it has high enough pressure and speed with it, it'll cut through it quickly. Even if it's dripping over thousands of years, it'll eventually cut through it. But either way, it's focused. See, people think they have to have a fire hose mentality and, in
Mm,
order to cure the fire. But rain will cure the fire just as much. It's just a softer approach. So I look at it like that. You should absolutely have a focused approach. But if you're multifaceted, then you need to concentrate on one thing at a time. We mess
yeah.
up because we try to do so many different things at the same time. And like you said, we end up diluted all over the place.
I love it. So let's talk about the promise of your show. When I say promise, I often use these examples, but I have a client, Brian Green. He is the host of the Commercial Break podcast. It is one of the biggest comedy podcasts in the world. It has over 50 million downloads. It's currently ranked number one on Spotify and Apple for comedy improv in the US. Super
Nice.
exciting. And his promise, him and his co-host Chrissy's promise is that you're going to laugh out loud at least once and not like just think to yourself it's funny. Like you're going to spit soda out your nose. It's like at least once because then, if you elicit an emotion that big, people are going to want to come back, right? Especially when it's laughing, when it's funny. I have another client, Ryan Lang, and his co-host Brooke Bishop. They run a company called Empire Partners. They help coaches become profitable business owners because most coaches are not. They know how to coach, right? They may not know how to run a business. And so they have a podcast called The Coaching Equation. So every episode they deliver their promise is an equation, something you can take away and apply right away. So, I often talk about you can go to a church service, right? I can go to
Mhm.
a church service and then I run into you and like Rod, you say, Allison, you're glowing. What's going on? I just got out of this church service. What was it about? You would have loved it. It was like talking about Corinthians. Like that's a bad sermon. Like if I can't
Yeah.
tell you like the message, the core central message, that's a bad sermon. And
Mhm.
so the same thing goes for your podcast that every single time somebody tunes in, they want to know that you are going to deliver on the promise of what is the problem that you are solving for them that they get to walk away with and apply in their lives. So it doesn't have to be that serious, like, a life changing kind of thing. It can be to laugh, it can be to be educated on something, but something like that you can clearly share.
Right.
If you were to say, like, what is the promise of your podcast of each episode, what would that look like for you?
Hmm. Yeah. Before you mentioned the second podcast with the guys who promised the equation thing for business owners, it was literally that they would walk away with something they can apply to their business and their brand
Beautiful.
like immediately.
Okay.
So it's more educational for sure, but you got me thinking now. So I need to go back to the drawing table and think that through a little bit more.
And I think it is a good start. Maybe it is a hack or an application or something that they can apply right away, but it ends up giving you the North Star, right? Like these are all the North Stars. The North Star is, why are you doing this? Is it to generate leads? Then again, it's a totally different show. So if you look at, do you know the podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire by John Lee Dumas?
I've heard of it, haven't watched it or listened to it.
John Lee Dumas he's one of the biggest podcasters out there. And so he is a prominent person in the FIRE movement. FIRE stands for financially independent, retire early. It's like a whole kind of a way of being, right?
Mhm.
And so he says in his podcast, he is continuously calling his audience Fire Nation, Fire Nation, Fire
Right.
Nation, Fire Nation, Fire Nation, Fire Nation. Generally speaking, I prefer you language. Like, hey, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Allison, how am I going to apply? Like, you want to hear like a one on one conversation, but the way John talks about it is very much like Fire Nation, Fire Nation. This is what we think. It feels like a club I'm not part of.
Uh,
But the good news is you can buy into that club. It is a lead generating podcast, right? So everything is kind of geared towards, become part of Fire Nation, buy my course, buy my mastermind, buy my, so it's couched with a lot of value, right? Like you learn a lot. He has incredible guests on, but it's always driving to the offers, right? Like
yeah,
everything is kind of driving to the offers, which is different from like a trust and credibility perspective, right? Like John Lee Dumas, you can pay to be a guest on his podcast because his reach is big. But most podcasters don't charge for their guests. Some do. So it is a lead generator. Does that make sense?
it does. Do you believe it's advantageous to like have a ebb and flow between the style or type of podcast?
You mean like
Episode to
interview or
episode?
solo?
Well, no, like lead versus, the second one, like when you were talking about developing like yourself as a thought leader and that type of thing.
The way that I think there's a really beautiful way to blend it. And I think when you structure a show, I teach every single one of my podcast clients this, and it is a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Is that you open the show, the first 90 seconds should always be benefit focused 100%,
Yeah.
meaning what problem does this episode solve for the listener? Not like, hey, I've had such a week, like nobody cares, right? If you're going to like kind of shoot the shit, if you've got a
Mhm.
friend or somebody, I mean, it's fine if you do that and that's kind of your style, but that first 90 seconds needs to be, like, hey, I know you've come here and you've come here because you saw the title and you thought, oh my God, I am spraying and praying on social media all day and I don't know if anything is working. But today, you're going to leave here knowing exactly what to do, exactly where to spend your time and what to leave,
Mm.
right? Like you'd want to listen all the way to the end if you're addressing their problem. And then you can frame it with a personal anecdote and then you can say whatever you want after. So I always start with like a benefit focused intro, and then I always coach having a mid roll, especially if you've got a business. So the mid roll is, hey, it's Rod. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you're here. Did you know that the ideas shared on this show is something I can help you with in your own business? Sign up for my free call. So I do that in all of my shows. So your paid offer or your main offer is in the middle, right? Like not everybody makes it to the end. So it is important when you're kind of at the height of where people are engaged, less than a minute long. And then the outro is typically a way to stay engaged, like sign up for my email list or for my weekly emails, or if you have a lead magnet or something. That would be my advice on that. How does that square with having a trust and credibility focused podcast, but still you are the authority, right?
Mm.
You are the thought leader.
No, I love it. I've been kind of doing that with some of the YouTube videos I put out, and it makes a lot of sense from a podcast world. So I appreciate you explaining it that way. I feel like I might want to do a diversified show where it's like you kind of know what you can expect for the most part, but every now and
Yeah.
then, like we break the norm and we might just have an open conversation or it might be lead focused. And so that's what I was primarily asking is, does it
Yeah.
make more sense to just like pick a target, stay with it, or, bounce back and forth depending on what topic you're talking on?
It is your show. You can set it up as you want, but it is good to have a cadence. Like for me, I don't, I interview thought leaders, I interview Seth Godin and Mariel Hemingway and people that are really, really changing the game.
Right.
Those aren't really a lead generating one. They are more of a trust and credibility one. And also, I don't want to talk about podcasting all day, every day. I mean, I
Yeah.
could, but that's not what I got into podcasting for. I think what I got into podcasting for is literally, how do you change the culture? And the way that you do it is through personal reinvention,
Uh,
and so it is through the lens of pop culture. And so could my podcast be far more focused? Yes. But would it make me happy? No, it would not. I actually had a second podcast called The Podcaster's Journey. It was a podcast for podcasters about podcasting. It couldn't be more meta. And I got to about 30 episodes and I'm like, I'm done. This is not what lights me up. And so I'll have a call like this, like a live coaching call, once a month, maybe twice a month, right? Where the other ones are more interviews. So you can find your cadence and you let people know. And so my podcast is under the umbrella of finding your voice because it all falls under finding your unique and true voice, whether it is to have your own podcast or to step up and do something in your community, in your life, and whatever it is that is hinging on personal reinvention.
so what I'm hearing is just as important to have structure as it is to have something that feeds you while you're doing this thing so that you can be consistent with it.
Well, I think that is the whole point, right? There is no, if people say, I don't want to do the tech, everybody tells me I should do it, I don't have time, it feels like a big drag, I'll tell them, don't do it.
Mm,
But if you feel like there is capacity, and sometimes it takes finding the right lane. Most people are in between lanes and they don't know it. They're like, I'll talk about anything and everything.
yeah,
And if you can snap into the right lane, then the road becomes clear
mm.
and it becomes easier. What I'm trying to do is like remove the friction, remove the in between, remove the maybe, and like find a lane that fits you. And the only way it fits you is if you are being your unique self. And sometimes people are trying to chat GPT their podcast literally and figuratively, where they want to be the next, Jay Shetty, they want to be the next Mel Robbins. And I'm like, let's find out who Rod is, right? Just
Mm.
like you're doing from a personal brand perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the solo episodes, like, so I'm interested in doing it because I have a lot to share, but I also know that, I have a bias, right? I'm happy to listen to myself, but does this make sense for the audience, right? For, 30, 45 minutes of just hearing me and my thoughts. I think doing that here and there makes a lot of sense, but I just feel like it's better to have at least a guest or a co-host or just a differing opinion, somebody I can volley back and forth with changes the paradigm when it comes to the conversation. So I guess my question to you as a person who's been doing this forever and you got a million downloads and all this other great stuff, which is great, by the way. Do you find it difficult for people to get success if they're just, you know, the only voice on the podcast? Or is it primarily like, hey, you're better off having somebody there with you periodically or more majority of the time?
I would ask you, why do you not like the solo?
I'm a perfectionist at heart. I want to make sure what I'm
Okay.
delivering is valuable. I'm going to do research and, make sure my words are right. And then again, in my mind, and I know this is in my mind, the attention span is short. So, 30 minutes of the same voice without a lot of bells and whistles and graphics flying into the screen and things of that nature, I feel like it'll be limited in terms of the reach.
Would there be I'm gonna throw some scenarios at you. Would there be value in 10-minute episodes where you talk about one framework, one concept, one game-changing concept? Could it be
Yeah,
5, 10 minutes?
for sure.
But Rod, are you somebody that is a talker?
Yeah. Ask my wife.
What
She'll
I
tell
mean
you.
by that is some people are more prolific and they love to talk. They love to explain things.
Uh, I'm more strategic in my approach in that, like, I'm not just going to get on and babble about anything, but I can connect real life stories. I can make sure that,
Great.
there's meat on the bone. I don't even want to put anything out that I wouldn't want to listen to. And I'm very conscious about making sure it makes sense for the person on the other end, not just from a title and thumbnail standpoint, but the actual content. Like, is this something I can follow along? By the end of it, like you said with the sermon analogy, will I remember what he talked about? And so I wouldn't even put anything out if it didn't kind of like cross those T's and dot those I's.
I wonder if you had some more structure and focus around the topics that would make this much easier for you. Because when you start with a blank canvas, it feels overwhelming because you could talk about anything and everything, or you could talk about everything and nothing all at the same time. And
Yeah.
so identifying where to start can be challenging. And so, my gut is telling me like you have a lot of angles, a lot of points of view, a lot of frameworks where you can chunk them down to tiny little bite sized ones where you can have a 5-minute podcast that people are going to tune into. They're going to get what they need and they're going to leave and they're going to come back. Or
See,
you
so
could, what?
you just hit me. Like, first of all, 5 and 10 minutes, I didn't even, it never crossed my mind. So that was a nugget altogether. In my mind, I needed 30 to 60 minutes for a podcast episode.
Why? Who told you that?
Nobody. That's just
Okay.
what I typically listen to. And that's typically guest driven, led podcast or either a co-host type situation. And so it's something that I've framed in my mind as the standard. But you saying that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do 5 or 10 minute episodes.
Well, I want to help you wrap this in a bow because I think I can help you with this. You
Okay.
had said your concern was scheduling people, coordinating calendars. Like it is a component, right?
Uh-huh.
You may want to think about doing this in a seasons, or a
Mm,
limited series. A season might be 12 episodes, and that's it.
mm,
See how it feels after the 12. Maybe you're complete. Maybe you want to keep going and reload. Like I always recommend when I work with podcasters, like let's build up your bank. So when you're starting, you already have 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes already in the can done. So you're not like feeling like, ugh. So that way it gives you opportunity to schedule. Like I can't tell you how many episodes I just have sitting on my Riverside account of recorded, ready to go, right? Because I'm just kind of scheduling it as I need. Some people will have specific days, like Tim Ferriss will schedule, one Monday a month, and he will stack up 4 or 5 interviews on
mm,
that Monday, and that's it. Oh, and then his editing team will handle it. You can do batch recording. I find batch recording can be hard unless you are Tim Ferriss, where people are, ripping out their hair to get on your show because it is so life changing. But, you can fit in an hour here and there and just kind of build up the bank and do that. From an interview perspective, where I could see this is having your dream guests would be an obvious one. Like people to see you, especially if it's a business driver, where you are establishing yourself as the authority and you're highlighting your dream client, right? You're highlighting their business. That's what we're doing today.
mm,
The other piece is they're experts in personal branding in so many different ways. Things that people don't know about. If it is like how to record an audiobook, if it is, there's my son. Why are you in your pajamas, bro? Um, Maybe it is finding the people or partners that you work with that can help fulfill some of the personal branding things where you are having a conversation. And honestly, it is much easier to have a podcast interview than it is to kind of create it on your own. You could do where you have, I don't know, once a week or once every 2 weeks. I would not go longer than once every 2 weeks, but you could have like once a week and then maybe you have a 5-minute Friday
mm,
podcast episode. You don't have to do more than you have to. Um, if bandwidth is a challenge, I would not recommend doing 2 a week. I would do what feels doable and get ahead of it as much as possible, but talk about it constantly
mm,
before you launch, during your launch. You cannot promote it enough.
Right.
because people think, well, if I promote it, but that algorithm doesn't show it to 98% of people that you want to hear it, that you want to hear that you've got it. So it is important to kind of multi-channel that.
Right.
How does that sound in terms of like, does it make it a little more manageable for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think having the season thing has always been an approach of mine, but again, I've just been repurposing content. So I've gotten some of my favorite people to agree to go like live on Instagram with me per se. And so I'll take that live content, drop it into YouTube, drop it into Transistor and
Yeah.
disperse it around. But I want to be more specifically focused on creating a podcast episode rather than doing something live. And that's the transition I'm going to make. But what's going to help me to make it based off of what you said, outside of doing it in season capacity in the batch recording, which I'm very familiar with, I actually coach my clients on that as well, is the 5 and 10 minute episodes. That's the game changer for me because
Good.
that'll allow me to like feel like I got the 7 or 8 episodes, while I'm getting the guest and doing the thing in between. So,
Yeah.
because
I
I can
love
do
it.
that in my sleep. I do 5, 10 minute episodes all the time. I just don't record them and post them.
Yeah. I would say record them and post them.
Mm,
And your life will change and it'll make it easier to consume information from you too.
yeah, love it. This has been helpful. I'm very excited about it.
Awesome. Did we kind of cover the bases? Are you walking here out of here with kind of a clear
Absolutely. My goal now is to make it so that you can find my podcast. So I'm gonna post
that would
enough
be step
content where
one.
it's like, oh, there it is. I see him.
You want to become found, and part of that is like naming your show as well, one that's not like everybody else's name. But I kept scrolling, I couldn't find it. So we need to make sure we can help you become found.
For sure. Absolutely.
Awesome. Rod, well, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you? They want to know more, they want to connect with you?
Absolutely. So I'm across pretty much every social media platform as Rod.Brinson. But I can also be found on my website, rodbrinson.com.
Beautiful. And Brinson is spelled Brinson.
Correct.
And I'll link it all in the show notes. Well, Rod, thank you so much for being a guest on the reinvention room and kind of being in the hot seat. I
Oh,
know it can be a little bit of a vulnerable spot.
it was perfect. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate the help. Excited for all of the help you gave me. Yeah, I'm gonna go tell my friends now.
I love it.